Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Farik and I'm a game developer. And I happen to look at games and play them not just as a player who wants to enjoy the game, but also as a developer on how things are implemented and how things are designed. Today I'm going to talk about how limitations made a game far superior to what it was. Either it's technical limitation which is forced upon you, or design some things in a limited way so that the game has more punch. I know that the last sentence is a bit hard to understand without the context. Before I give you the full context, I recently started my YouTube channel. I'm gonna have one video per week talking about various games through the lens of a game developer. If you're interested, make sure to subscribe, and here we go. The game or games that I want to talk about are two titles from Prince of Persia series, Warrior Within and Forgotten Sands. These two games show an interesting progression of development, or should I say deterioration of development. First, let's talk about the technical limitation that made Warrior Within better. Well, you might think, how on earth technical limitation can lead to something good? The word limits actually has a negative tone or weight attached to it, and I get that, but let me explain. Warrior Within was developed in the PlayStation 2 era, and in those days developers had to make sure the game runs smoothly on PS2 because most people had PS2. I assume I never had PS2, I always had the superior Master Race PC. But anyway, this decision was made, and when they were developing Sands of Time, the previous game, they noticed the RAM limitation made it so that you can only put so many characters on the screen. First, take a guess on how much RAM PS2 had. Your guess is probably wrong. It's 32 megabytes. Yeah, let's put that into perspective. This is a normal screenshot of how these days Google Chrome eats RAM, and many games these days require more than 8 gigabytes or even 16. These are normal numbers, and PS2 was running with 32 megabytes. And with that amount of RAM, they had to take account how much RAM the environment requires, the animation, collision detections, the movesets that the prince has. So the number of NPCs in a fight would be close to 6 or 7. I found this info in an interview with one of the developers. And in Warrior Within, they actually doubled down on this. The fights usually was with between 4 or 5 enemy characters, and they had to make it fun. So here comes the freeform combat system in Warrior Within. In this game, Prince can do many things with his enemies. He can block and wait for a counterattack. He can grab and throw, or take their weapons with the grab. He can use the environment to his advantage and wreak havoc. He can jump on enemies and deal damage. His acrobatics were even included in the fighting as well. And I know this game was generally received poorly by fans because of the change in style and themes. By the way, check my last video, I touched on that. And the other major thing was how the game became so focused on the combat, which I personally don't really connect with that because I love this combat in this game. Although the platforming can be fun as well, but I love the combat. I don't really connect with that. And they even extended combos for the prince as well. The main weapon combos are generally basic, but you can pick up weapons from fallen enemies and do some more combos with it. And the weapon takes damage when you use it, but you can throw the weapon for some good damage before that happens and pick up another one. Let's check out the last entry in the series, Forgotten Sands. Before I talk shit about this game, I still appreciated that this game exists. It showed at the time that Ubisoft was willing to make more Prince of Persia games. At least at the time, I was thinking. And the mechanics and platforming, although they could have more depth, but I joined the platforming. It was actually magnifique in some places. But the combat. The first thing you notice in the game is that the combos are really basic. You can't pick up weapons. The only thing you have is your sword for the whole ride and a kick. There are more, but you can play through the game with only those two. Oh, by the way, there are power attacks, which are basically normal attacks, which you hold down the attack button and deal more damage. But the enemies, the second thing you notice is that how many enemies are thrown at you at the same time. And this is actually a giveaway on how you're going to treat the combat. When there are more enemies in a fight, it means that each enemy offers less challenge or value, if you might, to the combat. And you're just trying to kill as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Taking the direction of a hack and slash game, but the enemies are really poorly designed. Jesus. We have basic bitch enemies, but tankier, basic bitch enemies that have shields, basic bitch enemies that summon more basic bitch enemies. And these things don't really mean anything until you play the game and realize there are only two major types of enemies. The one where you don't care and just attack them, and the ones that you also don't care, but before killing them, you kick them. Yeah, that's the combat of this game. And that's the combat. We went from that fun system where every fight you could toy around with your enemies, try out new combos, maybe throw them off a cliff or take their weapon and throw your weapon killing two and then finishing off the last one with a counterattack, to this meaningless shit. And by the way, did I mention they took the game in an RPG-light system as well? You have a talent tree in this game. There are some upgrades to your health and how much time rewinds you have, and there are 4 abilities. 3 of them are just basically spells that do some stuff in the already boring combat. One of them is stone armor. When you activate it, you become immune, basically immune to any damage, making the fight more trivial and you can just shut your brain off and go through the enemies like butter. Funny that I wrote that in the script because it seems at the end of the game they realized that the combat is meaningless. So they give you this sword, which is basically the same sword you have, and amplified the damage up to 11, which basically trivializes the combat even more, and also denies the upgrades you had on the skill tree except the stone armor. I knew this would happen, that's why I picked the stone armor. Yeah. This was my biggest disappointment when I first played this game back in 2011 or 2010. The combat in the previous entries were not challenging at all, but they were fun compared to this piece of crap. After so many years, realizing they actually couldn't do more enemies at a time because of technical limitations and forced them to implement something fun makes it all the way better. Let's talk about the other point that I wanted to make, how designing a game in a limited way can add more punch. You see, Warrior Within had these escape sequences from Dahaka, and those were really good. I still see comments on the internet about how Dahaka was one of the only games that made them feel the rush. And I thought about that for a long time and how they were able to do this thing. Let's talk about Dahaka itself first. The Dahaka is a massive black thing that is hunting the prince. And why is that so menacing? Because the prince is actually afraid of him. You can't fight it and you can't stand against it. The only thing the main character, and by an extension you, the player, does is running away throughout the whole game. And Prince is fighting a lot of things, from humanoid creatures to hellish dogs to giant monsters and one giant griffin. The other thing is that the game was implemented in a way that makes it seem like Dahaka is distorting the reality around him. In this cinematic you see he has multiple shades of him jittering around him. The voice that he uses seems gibberish until you rewind during those speeches, during his dialogues, and you realize he's talking in reverse.
Come to your death, therefore exit on that weep. You cannot escape your fate.
And the camera, whenever Dahaka gets near the prince, the camera gets this brownish or grayish filter, which indicates that when Dahaka is near, the world through the eyes of Prince loses color. How cool is that? And everything else is the opposite of Dahaka. They have been designed in a way that they pale in comparison against Dahaka. Even the prince is designed in a limited way, that he can only fight things that are in his turf. And his acrobatics and freerunning are the things that saves him from getting consumed by the Dahaka. And in Forgotten Sands, I think they try to do something similar. They're trying to set up Ratash as a big baddie. He has 2 chase sequences where he tries to be like Dahaka, but it falls flat on its head. Ratash isn't chasing the prince, he's just throwing fireballs. And they even copy-pasted the camera thing from Warrior Within as well. This moment that you see right now on the screen is not random or a bug. It happens on any playthrough. I checked it on the internet, which I don't know. They just put the code from Warrior Within in here. I know these 2 games are built using different engines, but it still could be possible. Or they looked at previous games and tried something similar for this cutscene. There are other problems as well. You actually fight Ratash in the playthrough. That implies that you can actually beat this thing. It's just like any other monster in this game. In Warrior Within, you could fight Dahaka, but only after so many times getting chased by it and finding the hidden water sword which enables the prince to fight it. And you fight Ratash 3 fucking times. And the design of the monster is not helping either. Dahaka was and is unlike anything in this series. It was truly otherworldly in this fantasy world. I know that might not make sense, but Ratash is just another enemy from the army that was unleashed in the game. The only special thing about him is that he speaks ancient Persian in a very bad way, I might add, and he has horns. Lots of horns. And I'm not saying these to completely bash the latest game. They tried to make it good. This means they were in a direction. And even bringing some things from the old games as well. Like trying something like the Dahaka or the QuickTime events from the Two Thrones. But this game just doesn't cut it. The limits were lifted and they made the combat hack and slashy but meaningless. And they designed the enemies and went, oh, we need a big baddie. Let's just make something before the games are released. Which I think what happened, because the later stages feel rushed to me. And it saddens me anyway, because after Forgotten Sands, there were no other Prince of Persia titles. Props to Ubisoft for listening to the feedback on the remake, but now we have no news from it, and I fear we won't get anything at all. Even though the last news was that the original studio that developed the original Sands of Time now has the Prince of Persia, but I don't know. And that finishes the video. Make sure to subscribe for more videos like this. Comment down below how you feel about the combat in these games, or what are your thoughts about how the Dahaka escape sequences were so good. Do you agree on limitations are not purely bad, and there are chances arise when we face the limits? And with that out of the way, check out my latest video, which was, I think, about hook deliveries in games. And make sure to subscribe and click that notification bell so you will get notified, and I will upload weekly. And just finish it off. Bye bye.